Good evening, everybody. It's 6:00 p.m. This is the regular business meeting of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. Please join me in reciting allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Members present include myself, Chair Jacob Pride, Vice Chair Robert Levenheim, Supervisor Michael Albert, Township Manager Julie Heilica, Administrative Coordinator Jessica Hodge, Conservation Recreation Director Dr. Alex Jackson, Engineer John Tressler, and Solicitor Ron Harrison. Announcements. Executive session was held January 14th from 5:14 p.m. to 6:19 p.m. regarding litigation in the M matter, back 9 matter, and personnel. Likewise, we had one on January 22nd from 1:05 p.m. to 2:01 p.m. regarding litigation in the M matter, back 9 matter, as well as personnel. Just want to remind folks as we get into the rest of the agenda that we established rules for public comment from resolution 602. So we're trying to avoid duplication by allowing folks to speak for 3 minutes during the time frame, after which the board would deliberate, just to allow the meeting to be more efficient. First order of business is the consent agenda, which is the consideration to approve the January 5th reorganization meeting minutes and the regular meeting minutes. Approving the bill pack in the amount of $334,814, monthly general fund, EMS fund, fire fund, capital improvement grants fund, liquid fuels fund, and professional escrow fund. Consideration to appoint Chris Bowers, the Environmental Advisory Council's Planning Commission member, term ending January 4th, 2027. Consideration to appoint Katie Machowski to the Environmental Advisory Council, term ending January 4th, 2027. And the consideration to approve the special event permit for custom import performance. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Levin. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Albert. Discussion.
On the bills, Sylvie, what's the Sylvie group?
Awesome. And I see it as
Salt, okay. That makes sense. Big one. That was the only one I had questions on.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fine.
Okay, next reports, emergency services.
How's everyone? Jared Raffel, Marsh Street Fire Chief. Fire tax accounts, funds, $24,310. Fire tax capital purchase account, $92,011. December EMS calls 12, December 25, fire calls 70. Recently we had 2 working house fires and 2 working vehicle fires. Total EMS calls for 25, 191. 2025 total fire calls 883, with a grand total of 1,024 calls. In January 2026, our large purchase was a $15,000 worth of repairs to our engine 11 up in Wooddale Station for a new foam pump and various mechanical issues that we had. Received notification that we approved for the 2024 RS5 and 6 Office of State Fire Commissioner EMS grant for $15,000. This will allow us to pay off our Lucas device, which was a grand total of $19,121. So that would be pretty clear. Also, we received $14,487.63 on the fire grant side to use towards our final radio project of $61,000. So hopefully that would pay off this year. I have no immediate need and no additional notes.
Thank you very much.
Good, thank you.
my turn.
Yes, thanks, Debbie.
Debbie Hewitt, Bristol Emergency Bridge. I promised you last month that I'd come back with something a little more inclusive. So last year's calls were 3,359. We now have 5 trucks because of the tax funding. We were able to purchase a new ALS truck, a new BLS truck, replacing our 1992 ambulance and our 2009 ambulance. Major upgrade. Thank you to Smithfield Township for your help in obtaining the $100,000 LSA grant, which will be a portion of the cost of our 3 power load stretchers for a total cost of $222,000. We handled 31 sports and standby events, multiple days and shifts, participated in 5 municipal events, both at Smithfield Middle. We offered 5 classes to residents of both townships and local organizations. We sponsored 1 paramedic through school, and now he volunteers several shifts a month. We offered in-house training as well as CPR recertifications. We served as a preceptor location for both paramedic and EMT students, and we have a number of students who are now part of our career staff. We're the only organization within the EMS community that has both volunteer and career personnel. We worked with the Rotary Club of the Strasburgs to have our Winona Falls Station exterior painted and the interior of our Marshall Creek Station painted. Our volunteer hours exceeded 2,000 plus training completed outside of normal shift hours. We wished and thanked Dr. Fellini, who had been our medical director since 1992. A happy retirement. And we now have Dr. Haskins as our primary and Dr. Kennedy as our secondary. And we're pleased to have had the organization complete licensure and having reached 60 years of service. Thank you.
Thank you. Solicitors report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the last report, I had worked on the land development improvement agreements for the Rocco Collision Service Land Development Plan, along with the Smithfield Sewer Authority plan, which will be on the agenda for later discussion. I also prepared the brief in the water gap appeal, where they appealed the denial of the preliminary plan. There are 2 matters pending there. One deals with the Commonwealth or appeal. This deals with the denial of the plan by the supervisors. So I had to prepare our supporting brief. I also worked on the Mountain Manor stipulation, which will be discussed later. I also had an opportunity to review the materials from Mr. Tressler regarding high density residential development option, and then just miscellaneous items, but those were the major ones.
Perfect. Okay. Engineers report, John.
Thank you, Jacob. Since the last meeting, I've had some discussions with PennDOT regarding posting weight limit on Post Office Road Bridge. Their position is that the repairs brought it back to where it was, and they are recommending the 3-ton weight limit. I don't know if we can do anything to bump that or not. I'm still in discussion with them. We reviewed and issued a review letter for 3 Point Garden Road on their new minor subdivision. We did work with Mr. Harrisek, pointed out on the outline, I should say, of a high density residential ordinance to be permitted as a standalone use in the ED zone for the board to consider and discuss. And I also had a meeting with Mr. DePetris and his engineer regarding his proposal for data centers within the Gateway project. And that's all that I have to report, unless there's any questions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Julia, manager's report.
Sure. We wrapped up all the 2025 revenue requests in total for that year. We had 118 submitted to the township, approximately 168 hours of staff time. So far in 2026, we've received 8, 2 of which are still outstanding. Time spent on those has accumulated to be 6.5 hours. On a good note on the grant end of things, we do have $33,000 on the way from an Act 101, Section 902 reimbursement. And we unfortunately received word today that neither Shawnee Fire Company or Delaware Water Gap were funded through the DCNR volunteer fire systems grant. So no dice there, but we'll keep trying.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see Tara Mezzanotte, so nothing on I-80 611. On the EAC, Alex, anything you want to present? I know we have an agenda item later on that, we'll discuss, but if you wanna give an overture now, that's fine too.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the EAC had their reorganization meeting on January 20th. Mitch, who's here with us this evening, was elected as vice chair. Recording secretary stayed the same. The EAC also set their meetings to have first Monday of the month at 7 p.m. as needed, and then the third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. for the regular meeting. And I just want to thank Mitch and Todd for being here tonight, and anybody else that I can recognize. And Katie, congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Alex. Supervisors, comments, anything?
No.
Nothing wrong? Okay, I just want to thank the DPW for all their work during the most recent snowpocalypse. We had some of the best roads in the county as a result of, that chaos, and our crew did a great job working, more than a day's work, so.
Quick question on that, 209, do we do that as a contractual, if it's still PennDOT? It's the one area that there's some pretty big issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Turning lanes are not good.
Nope.
That is correct. Our crew is prioritizing a couple of high priority intersections, and they are handling some of the ones on 209 that above the township roads to try and get them faster.
We're allowed to do that? Oh, okay. We're just-
Because it's connected to our road, we do have a little bit of leeway to pull snow. Because there is so much, it is taking time, and our crews have been working since Tuesday to do that.
Yeah, great. No, they're doing a great job.
Awesome. Okay, data center decommissioning criteria. I know there's also some information in there. Beyond clarifying the decommissioning, but also on the sound and noise. So Alex, you're here to discuss that with us and then tell us the next step.
Sure, I guess I'll move on, yeah, it's a little longer. Chairman, so just as a recap for the board, so the supervisors adopted an update to the township zoning ordinance criteria for data centers, disaster recovery facilities, and data centers accessory use. That was back in 2025, and then on November 13th, the Township Planning Commission discussed revisions. The edits discussed included revisions to the noise criteria and the decommissioning criteria. And during those meetings, your planning commission went over in great detail all the county planning commission recommendations on the data center ordinance. I believe you adopted your ordinance in October, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to emphasize to the board that your planning commission went, and engineer and solicitor were all there during that discussion. And this whole discussion was quite detailed and quite elaborate. So that took place, I believe that was part of, what the board had discussed back then when you adopted it. And then on December 11th, 2025, the Township Planning Commission again discussed revisions, more specifically devising the decommissioning language, again, revising the noise criteria. After discussing Penn Future's sound provision update, which was provided to the supervisors and also distributed to the Planning Commission, everybody, there were some edits, which basically now includes narrow band frequency analysis and deleted the outdated octave band table from the prior version, which was previously carried over from the old Smithfield Township data center criteria. So those edits were memorialized in the draft that you see and are now being presented to the board for your discussion.
Is the intention to have the planning commission review it at their next meeting?
That's up to the board. If you could send it to the county
Yeah,
for
I
a
mean,
formal review and send it back to your planning commission. It's up to the board.
I think it makes sense to trigger both reviews at the same time, but I'll defer to Planning and Robert if they have any other thoughts. I mean, it's pretty well thought out and the next logical step.
Yeah, I've got a question. So, I mean, I know we already had decommissioning in the original ordinance, so this is effectively just giving us a little bit more detail. Giving a bit of a timeline. So I'm having trouble fully realizing what has changed from what is in the ordinance.
That's a good question, Supervisor O'Bear. So on the second page, paragraph, that last sentence that says the decommissioning agreement shall include a bond or a letter of credit that demonstrates adequate financing is in place for decommissioning is the primary change to that
That's the
section.
minute, because we talked about financing, so it's just that a letter of
Provide more
credit is
teeth, I
there.
guess, right?
It's a, you know. And then in the noise, sound and noise, I did look at some of there were some text revisions to. I guess in the preliminary study, it's no longer required as part of conditional use. But now you would need an interim sound study as well, so not having to do it during conditional use. Is a little more permissive for the developer, but having the interim sound study is a little bit more restrictive for the community. It's also worth noting to the board that reference to noise and nuisance isn't in this. You could put that in here if you so please, that's in your current ordinance. That's up to the board, up to, T&M, up to you guys, what you recommend on that.
My one concern with the sound noise section, as I can tell. There isn't an indication of where the decibel level is measured. I know our sound ordinance is fairly clear that it's on the property of the individual that is concerned with the sound, but it's not. So is this on the edge of the property? Is this, as we know, sound, it's very relevant where it's measured.
Here it says. On the property line.
Where does it say that?
In the middle over towards it. Two-thirds through paragraph number 1.
No, yeah,
Why am I not able to read that? Have I got an old version here?
no,
Normal hours, maximum daytime, all day Sunday, decibel level measured on the property line of use. Okay. So I would just say, I mean, that is different
it's more
from,
restrictive.
it's more restrictive than our sound ordinance, so I guess that's fine. Our sound ordinance is on the property line of affected property. Which in this case would probably end up being the same, honestly, but. Okay,
Right,
all right, it's there. Thank you. Sorry, I missed it.
fine. Robert, anything?
Nothing.
Oh. I would think it's in order, then I'd entertain a motion to trigger both planning commissions to review. Draft ordinance number 262.
Make that motion. I'll second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Levin, second by Mr. Albert. Any discussion?
Clarification question for me. Are you figuring your reviews and do you want something scheduled or do you want to wait until you have review?
I'd rather wait till we have reviews,
Understood. Thank you.
if that's the consensus of the. Okay. All right, go ahead, Joel.
I was just wondering with the data centers, has any consideration been given to like other areas where they've had data centers installed and seeing what their experience has been? Since they've been installed and if they're having any complications? Because there are data centers that have been installed throughout the US. And that would be a really good way of doing that. Has anyone researched that?
Yeah. Alex, if you want to detail a bit of the research that you've done, that's essentially what went into drafting the data center ordinance. We.
Or the experience other communities are having now that they're in place?
Sure.
Like any of the
Yeah,
complications?
Go ahead, Mike.
Just want a reminder, the data center ordinance is already in place. That was done in October last year. And it is one of the most restrictive data ordinances that
Yeah,
we were able to review. So this is just one of the things that happened on that day was we realized there wasn't really enough teeth in the decommissioning bit, but we didn't want to stall getting the ordinance in place. So we decided to vote on it and that we would fix it at a later time to just clarify the teeth on the decommissioning, which basically says that's the line that highlights that there needs to be a letter of credit demonstrating adequate financing. So that's really what today is about, as well as the amendment to the noise.
I got
It was like
I see what you're saying.
clarification.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, just like as a recommendation, definitely look into what is happening in other areas where these data centers are pointing in. Just, I know that's a separate thing, so I got what you're saying.
Thanks, Rob, very well.
Thank you.
Well,
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion on, housing and economic development residential zone, John or Robert, I don't know who wants to start, at least maybe John, you can detail what you drafted for us to consider.
There's been, discussion over several months. How to address probably a two-pronged. And one is to create affordable housing. And two, how to get more use out of our economic development district. And the only way to get more affordable housing in today's market, saying that will always be the case, but is to have a high density component. The higher the density, the more units can be built for the dollar. And that basically means 3, 4, or 5-story buildings are necessary.
But only in our economic development zone, which the 3 major roads.
Right, so we looked at that, and so I drafted an outline of, I also looked at other ordinances where they have been successfully incorporated, one being Bethlehem Township, which has several similar projects. I looked at the criteria for theirs. I also looked at some proposals that are being proposed in Smithfield Township. And what we came up with is to take advantage of this, we believe a developer should propose a minimum density of 12 dwelling units per acre. And that could go up to 20 dwelling units proposed acre. If he's strictly going to do a residential building, and he must have public water and public sewer, I think that.
I'm talking about gross acreage.
Gross acreage, yes. It's too complicated. Still must preserve anything that is required to be preserved, which would be wetlands, steep slopes, whatever our zoning ordinance preserves, but for the simplicity of calculation, it's easier just to work off of gross acreage. And that's how Bethlehem Township does it as well.
Gross acreage is essentially what is left to be usable.
No,
I don't,
it is if you have 5 acres, you have a 5-acre tract.
right,
And let's say you have 1 acre of wetlands and 1/2 acre of steep slopes which have to be preserved.
right.
That would mean your net acreage is 3.5 acres.
Oh, okay,
Your gross acreage is 5 acres.
okay.
So if a builder was gonna put in the minimum 12 units per gross acre, on that particular site, he'd have to build a minimum of 60 units.
Yeah,
Yeah, if he couldn't put it in, then the site doesn't work. That's
Right.
not the township's problem, it just doesn't work. But if he has a nice 10-acre site that has very few restrictions and he wants to go with that 12, then he could put in 120 units. If he's doing strictly residential only, which would be permitted if this use is adopted. He's got a maximum height limit of 4 stories for 50 feet.
Mhm.
Somewhat as an incentive to get some commercial along with this development. We upped the density to 25 units per acre. And he's allowed to go to 5 stories for 60 feet. If he provides a commercial component equal to the floor area of one of those buildings, or 20% of the residential floor area.
Mhm.
Well, so we had another incentive, I don't know if it made it any, which is to say that on commercial parking, we've discussed this at length, but we can put it in here, which is to say either go with our parking requirements or the developer can submit something which he feels is for,
Demand based.
of what he wants to go. And, oh, there's another thing we said. This must be, in an area served by, sewer and water. And the reason we did that is because, it pretty much restricts where you can do this to where we want it, which is to say, at this point, Independence Road, Brown Street, and, a piece of Milford Road that goes to the airport from the East Stroudsburg line to the airport, but on 209, it only goes to Gateway, which is under, a major development, plan anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I think, if we accept it, we're basically talking about it, in some further, point, we should probably look at, the major mixed-use development, just to tweak things so there's a continuity between one and the others. I read through it, it's not that much, but there's a few things we should probably just change.
Right.
We can wait on that one.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think naturally there are some things there that are more permissive, but some things that are meant to be an incentive end up being more restrictive. You know,
Our goal here is to try to get something going or passed so that we can, we're not in danger of losing our multimodal grant on Franklinville Road, which I heard just got a hop on that, the last couple of days, right? So that's moving along, but
You didn't get the HOP, but you did get acceptance of the study.
Okay.
Which does give the developer the green light to go ahead and prepare his HOP plans in accordance with that study.
Thanks for that, Kurt.
I just want to highlight a comment I've made at the last, I think, 2 meetings where we discussed this, which is I'm all for making it possible to have this high density residential in the township, and especially, and if that includes also rezoning an area to something that is more akin to an EDR, economic district with residential. But I'm not a fan of amending our current ED so that it allows potentially anywhere for exclusively residential. And the reason being, the purpose, this was a B1, B2 zone that was converted to this ED zone, and residential was added specifically for the purpose of incentivizing commercial. So if we're getting to a point where the idea is to have no commercial on that property, in my opinion, that completely defeats the purpose of the ED zone.
Michael, remember, we're saying it must be served by sewer and water, which.
And another item on this agenda is expansion of the sewer and water all the way down 209.
Right, but
Which,
we can worry about amending this later. What we're trying to do is do something
but
now.
I'm not gonna, I don't wanna amend the ordinance for one developer and then go around and change it back. That's spot zoning.
This is what John and I came up with. If we incentivize the current ED section 308, let's say, and this way, it's relatively easy to do. If we're talking about a new zone, we talked about an R3 zone or a modified EDR zone, it's a long process.
Well, why can't it just be exactly the modification you mentioned, but limit that to a new zone?
Well, I'll defer to John on that. I don't know.
Well, and I may even defer to Ron, but my experience has been that a text amendment will go quicker than creating a new plan and a whole new zone.
Because you have
But
to post the properties and do mailed notice and all
but
that.
I may be wrong on that, Ron. I don't know what your experience is.
Well, a zoning amendment would go quicker. Advertise twice, once for 2 weeks and then gets reviewed by the planning commission here, the planning commission in Monroe County, and then it's ready to vote. You don't have to do a whole lot of hoops and better if you were looking at, I'm looking at your amendment here. This was just a zoning amendment.
It's tough because I see there's a couple of small properties that want to do something akin to probably not high development, or high density, but I've heard about people that have properties that they want to do, 6 units on a second floor and have the first floor be something else that's permitted. That's still tough because they need to utilize all of the ground floor for that use, minus any incidental things like cluster boxes and whatnot. So I'd like to see something that fits those in too. I also share the concern that we don't want the whole EV zone to be this, but I think probably a couple of riders attached onto this more sighting standards would make it easier, more digestible. Otherwise, when you're talking about new zone, you do have to pick out where exactly you want it to be. And I think that's where the spot zoning concern really gets strong, unless you do wide swaths like we had at the last meeting, was mostly 447, that corridor.
I mean, are you allowed to have in your zone? Or sorry, yeah, I guess in a zone or in your zoning ordinance, stipulations that a certain covenant is exclusive to a corridor? Because I think everyone generally agrees that we're talking about 447. Makes sense for 447 to have this sort of option, but don't really want to see it on 209.
Well, I think the easiest way to handle that is to, if you don't want to create a new zone, you create an overlay.
Right.
This criteria for the 447 corridor and Brown Street or whatever
Yeah.
else you want to include.
I would like to see, if we were to take that route, I would like to see the property that sort of already has it, like behind Smithfield Gateway is, I don't remember if it's zoned EV or not, but the Shawnee Senior Living, I forget exactly what it's called. I don't remember if that's EV, and I know the property was directly adjacent to it, not necessarily all owned by Gateway, but some others. I'd like to see that included. Just because I think it makes sense, at least on the rear portions, where it's street frontage, I don't think they're going to get it. But I don't mind the overlay approach because I think it's a balance. I don't know how an overlay works though in terms of procedure. Do you still post physically the properties that would be in an overlay?
You're talking about establishing an overlay district. I would post that. The law really isn't clear in that regard, but in order to be safe, I would post. And notify the property owners as you would with a map change.
Sure.
You would.
It allows you to sort of have the best of both.
You're informing neighbors, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah,
So we're pretty much agreed, I would say, Independence Road and Brown Street. I'm looking at a piece of Milford Road and wondering if, at least especially as far as sewer goes now, if that would be a candidate for it, only because nothing else has worked.
well, there's the one gentleman, Jonathan Weber, came to one meeting.
Well,
At the beginning. What's that?
If the one who wants to build a low cost house there.
He wanted to build like 6 units.
Oh, no, it's different.
No, near Lake Valhalla, the Close Encounters building, he wants to tear that down and develop straight residential there. It's a fairly small particle. I mean, it certainly doesn't hit the 5 acres, but I know that there are other types that are.
Is that the massage parlor?
Yes. I'd like to see improvement, in that realm, too. But maybe that's a different solution than this. I at least think that we can generally agree on the framework of an overlay to sort of handpick more without necessarily. Overlays can be more restrictive too, if I'm not mistaken, right? They're not necessarily all permissive. Like, we wouldn't want high intensity commercial use in a place that we kind of anticipate residential. I know that's dictated kind of by acreage and setback limits too.
No, but I also remember, if there's residential, there's a reason for commercial that doesn't exist right now, especially small businesses.
I really like the maximum density option that's, D that talks about, that kind of says that you can incentivize your residential if you add the commercial component. Where it says that it may be on the first floor of predominantly residential building or somewhere else on the lot, I assume that that could be interpreted to mean I build let's say like a drive-through Starbucks now is a thing that we're starting to see pop up. If you were to, you could concentrate your commercial in one of those.
Yeah, that was the thought.
Use like that.
I mean, there may be, there could be attractive land, or the developer may wanna just keep a residential building separate from this commercial aspect, and
Right,
wanna give them flexibility, that's all.
yeah,
And I think the devil's in the details, and if the idea of this discussion is to sort of say, like, let's draft something and see what it looks like. I mean, in order to move this along, I'm fine with that. I'm not gonna say that I'm 100%, but
I guess.
But
And Michael, I agree with you, preserving, for instance, 209. As the way we have it now in ED, because that's where we're probably gonna see hopefully, a lot of growth once the sewer comes in with commercial buildings.
well, and I can appreciate that. Typically, not exclusively, but you might see if you've got commercial right next to residential, which a lot of this section is. I mean, I think some of the homeowners in the residential area might prefer a slightly denser residential to then a Wawa or, or a data center. Or something very commercial, it's sort of a transition. R2s are often transitions, right? So this is sort of that, and I think in that sense, it makes sense along that corridor. So again, I'm happy to see what the ordinance change would look like.
Yeah,
And that, at that point, public can dig into the details and you can have a hearing
Well,
and decide if it's moving forward or not.
we would also be able to have at this stage a map of the theoretically eligible parcels, so we can kind of decide whether or not we would want to go. I mean, I have a feeling it's a huge amount, and I don't want it to be as huge as it probably is right now. But I think that the general direction on that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and if we're doing the overlay and then neighbors are informed and. Have an opportunity to provide their input, that's what matters, I think, is making sure that everyone that's in this area and adjoining adjacent can provide their input.
Yeah,
Well, I think we should proceed with some haste here only because it is coming up and that's when our multimodal grant that we already have expires. I assume we can extend it if we show some progress, but we've got to do something.
Just to clarify, this is the multimodal to realign the road.
Yeah.
right.
Well, I think the progress would be submission of plans to PennDOT for an HOP. I think that would certainly satisfy the progress, but you're gonna have to satisfy the developer that you're moving forward so that
I think
he will spend that money to prepare those plans.
And I think the developers, as a partner on the multimodal, you know. So anyway,
So, just so I'm clear, where are we gonna extend this overlay? Independence Road, Brown Street, are we going up Milford Road at all?
I would like to see the properties, and maybe this requires some coordination with the county planning commission. But I'd like to see what parcels exactly are eligible in terms of. 5 gross acres and being served by central sewer and water, because I realize that that's not just. Public, entities, I know that. I don't know of any in Shawnee off the top of my head that have both, but there's theoretically some in that area that might be served by Manuel Lincoln.
You'd have the EDs ever.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm wondering. I don't know.
EDs on.
I just want to see exactly how far reaching it is, because if it's smaller than I think. I'm more amenable to the direction. I really like the incentivizing of the commercial. It makes more sense, I think, frankly, than what we have right now, and I think the incentivized option, which has really complex math and tries to get people to, there's no definition of what suitable means in terms of how to transfer your gross commercial space. So I think that if we can get a map and I guess a more fleshed out draft based on this, I think that would be good. And I would like to think that for our February 18th work session, that we could potentially spend time on that so we can leave the rest of our meetings to hopefully be getting some other tasks done.
I can try to get you something in advance of that. For your
Yeah.
consideration.
Does that make sense? Like, okay.
I'm just wondering exactly the overlay area, what were you talking about?
We're talking about an overlay to basically highlight certain parcels that we think make sense for
No, for
eligibility to,
Independence Road.
it could be anything. Right now, we don't know everything because we're talking specifically about air,
No, I was just.
yeah, no, the idea of an overlay is it generally adds or subtracts some sort of character from a particular zone. So an overlay is different than changing the zone because you can generally still do everything that's already in that zone, but you allow some additional incentive or some additional type of development is the thought. So rather than change or create a new zone, at least in the interim, we want to see what properties would meet the 5 gross acres and served by central water and sewer. So that's our next step. And then on our February 18th meeting, we'll be able to discuss that more at length so that we can kind of move along the other projects that we're working with.
That's a quick question, the over, it's probably for Ron, if this moves forward, right? Does this stop anyone from having precedence to do it someplace else? So if you allow this,
Hmm.
someone decides they wanna do the same thing someplace else, you say no, and they go back and say, you did it here, why can't I do it here?
No,
A request for a zoning amendment, which just would be, it's a legislative matter. It's something that can be requested, but the supervisors can deny it without any appeal or without any retribution for it. Now, there are certain type of zoning amendments, a municipal curative amendment or a landowner curative amendment, that's different. Plain old zoning amendment is just a legislative act, and the supervisors can say, we're not gonna do it here, but we did it here, and that's too bad.
Okay.
Mitch,
I had raised, I think, several points at the last meeting relative to high density housing.
sure.
And I'm curious as to whether or not you've given any consideration to those points and what your response might be.
I don't think anyone's prepared to give a response today, but I think the intention is to have something that's more than just a nebulous idea before we can address that. And I think for the February 18th meeting, we'll hopefully be able to sit down to what we think the answers to that will be.
Well, I think the basic question is before you do a lot of work on promoting and incenting high density housing on Smithfield Township. The question is why? Why do you want to pursue this? And what are the benefits to the township and the residents?
I can appreciate that, when we'll certainly get into that, but I think we have already, maybe not to your satisfaction, but we know why we need more housing. There are people that already live here that don't live in good enough conditions. They want to stay here. And there's no room to downsize for anyone that wants to downsize. There's no room for anybody, even young professionals that live in the area to be able to stick around. It's difficult. There's a lot of different reasons, but in terms of the ordinance, we're not going to be, as direct in, this housing is for this type. I think that we want to be broader than that, but we'll get into why and how more in detail at the work session when we have more than a concept, because right now, this is a concept that we've only let sit. Don't know exactly where it's applicable. For, 2 hours ago, we might have got this updated version, so. I think our intention is to dedicate, a couple hours on the 18th to deciphering exactly where we go from here. I don't know if.
Well, I was just saying, Mitch, I mean, I think probably for the last 10 years, there's been developers coming in here. I'm not saying we're doing everything for developers, but telling us that the need and what people are looking for is higher. They're looking for some apartments. And that more younger people don't want single family homes necessarily. And so there is a need for that to some degree. But I also agree, we don't want it everywhere. It needs to be limited. And then the last thing I'll just say is, I think this also leans into your argument, which I think is a valid one, that at some point it would be nice to have an updated strategic plan or an updated plan. I mean, one thing that I know I said this once before on the planning commission, which is that I have a challenge with these township specific plans. And the reason being, you can talk about, well, I don't want it to be busy on 209. Why don't we have it like it used to be in like a single 2-lane road? And the challenge is 95% of the traffic on that road is coming from one township and going to another township. And we're in the middle. They're driving up to Bushkill, they're going further away. It's hard to do a plan in isolation of your neighbors. I'm a big proponent of coordinated plans with Middle Smithfield, with Smithfield. I would love to see that happen. That's why I do think that the Monroe County, at a countywide plan is probably a better place for us to look at when we look at strategic direction. So I actually do hope that in the next year or two, we do a Smithfield Township plan, but I don't think it should be this deep comprehensive thing, because it frankly is just unrealistic to think that you can set certain rules specifically for your township without thinking about what's going on in neighboring townships and not knowing that they're gonna change and you have to sort of change with them. Does that make sense? I guess I want to say, we also need to look at the county level planning, to think about what is happening countywide, what are the changes that are happening countywide, whether we like them or not. And make sure we adapt in a positive way that allows us to keep our rural character while also being cognizant of the realities of what's going on in neighboring townships and all around us.
And just speaking to the question of high density. Assuming there is a pressure for more housing here, I think all of us would rather see it in high density along our corridors rather than spread out around the township and taking more and more open space and making it into housing. I personally would rather see no more single family houses built around here. I think the only way we're going to preserve open space is to stop that by offering another incentive. And anybody wants to see this, this is the last couple of days in Shawnee Valley, where 19 acres are being clear cut for development, which nobody wants, at least nobody that lives here. 19 acres. You realize that a deer needs to feed on 22 acres, one deer, and this is 19 acres, is no longer there. And we don't want that. I don't want it. I would rather see high density developments along our commercial corridors and not have any more of this. Because I think this is a travesty. I'll pass it around if you look at it. Anybody want to think of it?
Is there a benefit to the township?
For what, for this?
Well, I understand that, but for the high density housing, is there a tax benefit? Is there any estimate?
Well, we don't even look at that. There is, but we don't look. And by the way, another thing that I'm sure will come up is everybody talks about the school taxes. What about the schools? Well, the statistics that you can Google and read anywhere, because there's a lot of them. High density housing, especially what we're talking about, which is 1 and 2 bedroom communities, have very little to schools. 1 bedroom apartments have nothing. 2 bedroom apartments, they figure about 1/4 to 1/2 of the student. per apartment, on average. And the other thing in East Stroudsburg is there was a meeting of all the parents in the school district about 2 weeks ago, in which the school district revealed that they don't know what to do because they're losing students. They've lost 600 students in the last couple of years, and they're gonna have to consolidate or close schools. It doesn't save any money, but what it does is say, we've got capacity that we're not using, and every time we lose a student, we lose the subsidies from the state on that student.
I'm going to defer the rest of the discussion to the next, to the February 18th meeting, when we have something a little more concrete. I think, I appreciate everyone's perspective, but I think we're gonna be better served by discussing, so when we have something in front of us. And we'll make sure that goes online ahead of that meeting, so we'll make sure we have that, hopefully a week or so in advance if possible.
Do what I can.
Yeah, but if you need me to contact, Eric, planning, I can just give him this and say, can you give me a map of what would be eligible?
Yeah.
Just to make it easier.
I mean, I was going to see where I could come up with, but if Eric probably has it more easily than I do.
Yeah.
And that would save me some time and effort.
Alright, I will contact Eric. Yeah, it is cool. Okay. Alright, we have some progress on the sign ordinance. Michael, do you wanna give an overview on that? I know Alice has some info. I know that we have.
All right, let me go. Okay, so in front of you, you have a new draft ordinance related to signage. As you may recall, several months ago, I don't know when it was, there was a draft ordinance that was significantly larger. There was a lot of questions around off premises signs, which is another way to say billboard, but it's not exclusively billboard, because billboard, you think giant. But off premises signs mean any sign that is for a business that is not located on that business's property. There was a lot of questions, a lot more that we needed to look into, so we agreed that the committee, which consisted of Alex, myself, and Dave Strunk from the planning commission, we met every week for an hour, first for the large ordinance, and then we decided it made sense for this committee to sort of tackle this one sort of part of the signage ordinance at a time. So what you have before you, we thought was the most pressing part, and this is namely defining and creating some language around limited duration signs and temporary signs. Temporary signs being yard signs, things that are going up that are very temporary, as well as the limited duration signs, which tend to be more like a year, tend to be construction signs, real estate signs, that sort of thing. So adding definitions around that, clarifying that, those are two things we added here. And then the other thing that we added here was increased power effectively to the township around removing and or providing notification and then requiring the removal of illegal signs in the townships that don't meet the criteria of pre-existing, non-conforming. So it does allow for the zoning officer to remove effectively temporary signs without providing notice if they are illegal. So that would be if someone puts a yard sign on somebody else's property, advertising a business or in the right of way. That is technically not legal right now, but the township officer right now, the zoning officer right now, the only signs they can remove are snipe signs. Snipe signs are signs that are on utility poles. No sign on a utility pole is legal. That property belongs to the utility companies and they do not allow them. We are allowed to remove those. This provides the ability to remove illegal yard signs effectively. It also allows for the removal of dilapidated, falling over signs. If they are at all permanent, it requires notification, all that sort of stuff, and the owner has to remove it. So this was all in the last draft ordinance, but it's only really those sections, defining limited duration signs and talking about when they're allowed, when they're not allowed, temporary signs, where they're allowed, when they're not allowed, all that sort of stuff, as well as our ability to better manage illegal signs. And there's a bunch of definitions. This whole thing is 40 pages long.
Right.
But I will say a bunch of it is definitions that are absent from the current ordinance. Banner flags, abandoned signs, inflatable signs. Snipe signs was actually not even defined.
Right. Do you think at this point it's prudent to trigger the reviews?
So we still need a legal review on this. Is that right, Alex? Full legal review. Matt, zoning officer, has reviewed it and his comments have already been incorporated into this.
Okay.
Obviously, I think signage, reviewing from a legal standpoint makes sense because you start talking about potentially free speech and that's what
Yeah.
signage is. Because but I think we've done a good job. Most of this does come from, the model ordinance that we were using before as a template.
Well,
And you should be aware, Mr. Chair, that this was given to me at the end of December. I probably began to look at it initially the first week in January, and I just haven't had a chance to
but it's okay, we've had other,
follow up with review based upon the other barking dogs I've been dealing with.
sure, well, we've had a lot of ordinances that we've been getting through, so, ideally. You think you could get a review for February 11th, our next,
I would think
Meeting?
so. Yeah, I would believe we would be able to get it.
Yeah, is this restricting signs on anybody's private property? Like that if they just put up a sign on their property, that the township can come in and say that's an illegal sign?
Well, right now, there are laws already about signs you can have and you cannot have on your property. It doesn't, restrict free speech, whatever. It's exclusively about, I mean, the language is here.
playful manner.
Yeah, about businesses and so, I mean. You cannot right now, put a big billboard on your property. By the way, there's a whole slew of when temporary signs are legal. What I was talking about is if it doesn't meet any of those legal criteria, so if it is considered an illegal sign. What this does is allows for temporary signs to be removed. Right now. The zoning officer would have to cite for a yard sign that is technically illegal, would have to go through a process in order for that sign to be removed, except snipe signs. And the reason we could do that so easily with snipe signs is because of how very clear it is that it's illegal, because it's on somebody else's property that has already written a letter saying any snipe sign on any of our utility poles is illegal.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense if it's somebody else's property, but I think defining any sign as illegal, you're gonna run into some major First Amendment problems if it's somebody's own property.
Yeah,
So I understand that people will call things illegal, but the supreme law of the land is the First Amendment, right?
Sure.
And so you would open it up to some pretty serious legal battles.
so we've gone over all that. What's the First Amendment right? I mean, you're still allowed to restrict signs in a township. It's done in every township size. What you really can't do is say,
Content, you can't restrict.
you can't restrict content, right? So, and in fact, what this does is actually allows more, if it's not, business specific.
Would you do that any different if it was a piece of paper? Can I write whatever I want on
Yeah.
a small piece of paper?
Yeah.
Would it be a big one?
Theoretically, you can't
Is that
have a
something-
snipe sign
Yeah.
that says lost dog on a utility pole. You're not allowed to have
If
that.
we go
Oh, you
beyond it,
people, I understand.
hang on one second. If we go beyond it,
Okay, sorry.
question and answer, I wanna make sure we time it so everyone gets their
Yeah.
say.
I guess I'll just say, thank you for the comment on free speech, and we're very well aware of it, which is one of the reasons why, I mean, we've been talking about signage since I started in the planning, I mean, probably 10 years or longer.
Yeah.
How there are challenges, and the biggest challenge that has been noted is a lot of these 209 littered with what are illegal signs, because they're not allowed in our ordinance, that are in right of ways, that are not on properties that belong to people. I mean, that's one example. So,
And that I completely understand. Other
Yeah.
property, right of ways, et cetera, that makes sense.
Excuse me, may I have your name, please?
Philip Reinhardt.
Thank you.
But on your property, if you wanna write up a sign that says, God is great, or I hate Biden, or anything like that, that's protected under the Constitution and also Supreme Court decision 2015 called Reed versus Town of Gilbert. We can't control any of that.
Yeah.
I agree. My worry is that is it just that now it can't have a certain size sign saying that? And is there a busybody that's gonna come up with a reason why you can't say what you wanna say? I think that's.
No,
It's entirely on our end, it's as aesthetic as we can, but it's just not about the content, you know, it's about making sure that the area doesn't become blighted. We have, the worst offender is these feather flag signs that get shredded over time in the wind, and then they become a nuisance, and they're usually in the right of way and things like that.
Yeah, that's polluting other property, which
Yeah,
that makes,
100%.
that I completely understand.
That's, like, if you ask Scott Amoy, who probably has the same exact views as you, the chair of our planning commission, I think that's Scott's number one pet peeve is, you know, think that intrude on other people, so I think that's the intention, and they're certainly gonna review it once we get through a legal review.
and that, exactly the point that he's raised is the lens you should be reviewing this with. Solicitor.
Yeah.
Caresack, yeah.
Alright. Under new business, we have consideration for revisions to the developers agreement regarding the Smithfield Sewer Authority and Development Plan. Want to say this was done at some point in December, could have been earlier than that. I don't have any backup, but I know, Michael, you had some stuff. Did you want Russ to come up to the?
It really was at my request that this was on, because I had reviewed
okay.
the revisions that were suggested by Attorney Kidwell on
Sure.
behalf of Smithfield, the sewer authority.
Yeah.
I had prepared a development agreement and sent it out December 15. In fact, a little earlier than that, December 11. And then Bob Kidwell had asked for a Word version so that he could then mark it up and do whatever needed to be done, which he did. And sent me a marked up copy. And he had a number of changes. He wanted to make sure that the authority was indicated as both the owner and developer of the project, and that the fees that are charged would be reasonable, necessary, and itemized. That there would be no release for the township's acts if the township did something that was negligent or willful. And the major items are that the authority doesn't want to post performance security. According to the economy and cost estimate, that security would be around $212,000. The authority doesn't want to post the 18-month maintenance security. Again, I believe their argument for that is that we're not constructing any public improvements. We're just doing private improvements. I'm not sure, however, if that works for the stormwater, but I'll defer to John in that regard.
Stormwater's almost done anyway.
And they do not want the restrictive covenant provisions in the stormwater covenant that I normally put that runs with the land. In other words, that the owner of that property would have to take care of and make sure that the stormwater facilities are clear and able to be used and not being accumulated with various particles. So
Just to be clear, not saying they don't have to do these things, they will do these things, but that they wouldn't need to be bonded. And I will say I have some language here that I was told if maybe it could be added in lieu of any performance or financial security, the authority shall, upon request, demonstrate to the reasonable satisfaction of the township solicitor and the authority that the authority maintains the sufficient funds. Because for them, they're saying, because it's a public entity, they're raising these funds to do it, they're gonna have the bank account.
Essentially want to self-collateralize.
Yeah, they're just gonna say, we're gonna have the revenue, we're gonna show you that we have it before we start any work. But that means we have to have it and we have to get a bond for it, which they're basically saying is doubling what they need to have. And the main rationale for why it's a little bit of a unique is it is a municipal entity. And the reality is, in the event that the sewer authority goes bust over this $200,000, which of course would never happen, but in the event they did, it's the township that would have to ultimately pay for it anyway. So there's the ramification, there's no difference really, I guess, in that.
Well, the authority is a separate entity.
But it's part, we went,
I feel like.
we went through this in detail around our audit, and we made a very strong argument that they are part. That was the whole thing around why, when we had our whole conversations around the audit.
Yeah. I don't have issue with the changes if John has. I don't know, I know the stormwater part is probably the most important, given that they're not constructing any other improvements necessarily for public use. I mean, we have our own park immediately next door, you know, I get that.
Part of this came up too, because I mean, I'm on the sewer authority.
Yeah.
I'm appointed as the sewer authority representative. My confusion, because I assumed these sorts of bonds were specific to the public improvements, because I thought in other cases they were specific to public improvements, not all the improvements of the project. Because we don't,
Through public improvements, correct.
but the fund we're requesting is not public improvements, because there's no public improvement in this case.
Well, again, and that's what the authority is saying, but I can't just say, okay, you gotta have the supervisor.
Right.
Oh,
I-
hold on, I
Hang on,
apologize.
hang on, we'll do public comment.
No, it's not, it's about pertaining to this issue.
Yeah, but we'll do that once the board discusses and then.
Oh, okay,
then-
sorry.
No, it's okay, well, I'll call when we're ready. I mean, I don't have any particular issue, I think it makes a lot of sense, I'd like to extend that hand of cooperation to them. I mean. Are there any other specific requests other than that? Does that seem?
That's the one line plus the edits that were already submitted.
Okay. Robert, anything?
No, is Russ here? What?
Russ,
Yeah.
yeah, do you wanna?
No, I just,
Michael already
these days,
spoke about it.
Russ, so there may be some questions in this next, new business article about, letter to Manwalowicz. So I know in the sewer authority, we studied the Manwalowicz sewer, what was it called, the facility. The Hanover did a report, so we may just need referrals, to some of the things we found in that. But if you just stick around, so we can get through the next item, that's all I'm asking. Okay,
Okay, but I don't know what
well,
I could offer, but I'll stick
all right,
around.
well,
Thanks,
you're a source of information, that's all.
okay. Sounds good, thank you, Russ, alright, yeah, Katie, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so just to clarify. We are, the developer is paying the $212,000 for this, or we are?
No, the developer, which in this
Okay,
case is the sewer authority,
So he's just adding language to specify that part.
Let me,
Go ahead, Mike.
so you may have seen this with Shawnee Valley,
Yeah,
when a developer develops a property. Any public improvement that they're going to develop, in addition to getting approval to move forward, they have to post a bond. In
okay,
the event that they do everything except the public improvements, and then they get out of town. That bond can then be taken by the township to finish those public improvements.
okay,
But my understanding is it's pretty typical that. Any of the sort of improvements on the property end up falling under this developers agreement, and in this case. The sewer authority has said, doesn't necessarily make sense for us to post the bond, and because we have a bank account showing you that we have the money that's been reserved for this purpose. And they want to add that language so that they don't have to also post the bond.
okay.
Right, cause
For the
ultimately.
public.
Understood.
Cause ultimately it would be us drawing down on the bond. Which would happen in the effect that they default, which means we would already have to assume. Their liability
Responsibility. Yeah,
anyway, so
yeah,
we
that's what
essentially
I'm-
decided not
That was
to,
the part that I got confused on.
yeah, no, it's easy
Thank
to
you.
do, yeah. Alright,
So, I mean, can I just make a motion to approve the document as amended? But including this line that I have that was drafted by the one I read. Just saying it'll give the township access to see the account so that we know that there's the money to finish this project.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Albert, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Levenheim, discussion. Go with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
I'm gonna need a copy of this and I'll give you this
You
back.
can have that.
Well, here, like,
Keep the plastic, it's fancy instrument. Fine, okay.
wow,
I'll take it.
very nice translucent folder.
Thank
Okay,
you.
next, item being under new business, the consideration for the offer of stipulation regarding the M Manor Back 9 MX injunction litigation. I wanted to say before we get to the actual consideration that in the spirit of community, the board has chosen to extend an olive branch to restore the right of the Burn Boys, the ability to ride with friends. It's our hope that in this, this results in some positive movement. Michael and Robert have thoughts and they'll address some of the details. But I want to note for the record that the attorneys from the represented parties have seen the draft of the stipulation earlier this week. And note that this applies only to the injunction as it relates to the zoning case. It is different than the underlying case itself. This is theoretically temporary, but Michael, I'll let you explain if you want to any
Yeah, I mean,
additional.
I don't see, well, the Burn Boys are here.
Yeah, they're here.
Not here, but, effectively what this is, it's actually, we went back to the initial offer that had been made. Again, in keeping with Judge Zulik's indication that you can come to some agreement until the appeal is heard around the writing of the family members. That offer at that time had included some stipulations around the zoning officer having to be present. And instead, we sort of dropped that, added that this would be the two Burn Boys, along with up to a maximum 4 friends, all under 21 years of age. There's some a number of hours provided, but it does include weekdays, Saturdays, Sundays, 3 to 6 during the week, Saturdays 10 to 4, Sundays noon to 4. It also very clearly highlights a couple things. One, that all of the laws in the township must be held into account, including our noise ordinance. So that's important. This doesn't mean we can break the noise ordinance. It also doesn't condone any development of the property or motocross facility, and certainly doesn't condone the use as a motocross facility, but does ensure that, especially if the case is delayed significantly further, that at least the family that owns property, their boys and their friends, can continue to use the track as they would if this was their backyard and as a residential area. So this has been provided to the attorneys, and regardless of whether they accept it, we have to vote on whether or not we're formally making this offer.
The reason is later on Sunday at noon was just because there's a church nearby and we didn't want to disturb service, that's all.
I'll entertain a motion on the offer.
I'll motion to approve the offer.
Motion by Mr. Albert, do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Sure. Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Good evening, esteemed members of the board. I am actually here speaking on behalf of the Byrne family tonight regarding the township's proposed stipulation addressing personal family use of the property for Hudson and Grant. First, I want to thank Mr. Levenheim for the time and effort he has put into this. We recognize that he heard the request at the last meeting. He acted quickly and he worked to be responsive, and we appreciate that. We acknowledge receipt of the township's proposed stipulation and understand that the township has characterized it as a firm, non-negotiable offer. However, as written, there are specific components that raise concern and do not appear to function as true private family use of the property. The owners greatly appreciate the steps taken toward the resolution, but until they have had the opportunity to fully confer with their legal counsel, they are not prepared to state a position verbally this evening. They simply want to ensure that anything agreed to is legally sound and does not create unintended consequences moving forward for them in the future. Any response will be provided formally and in writing after that review, but I think it is a step in the right direction. So thank you all for that.
You should be aware now that the vote tonight is to confirm the offer. We understand the offer may not be accepted, or that you may want to make changes to the offer, et cetera. Whether the board would want to do that's another story. Right now, this vote is simply to say, we confirm the offer
And
on the
we
table.
greatly appreciate that.
I also think that Mr. Albert deserves equal credit on this because he started this several months ago trying to get something in place.
And the efforts have not gone unnoticed. We appreciate that. You know, we just, and obviously, yes, you are voting on the stipulation. But, you know, we just want, obviously, the legal counsel on us to offer an advisement, sure things, but it's a step.
Can I say one thing too? I'm aware that, Attorney Karasak was sort of dotting his i's and crossing his t's. Well, I would say we didn't specifically agree that this was the absolute firmest thing possible. The hours, they were sort of like, oh, well, let's do this. So I think if there's a tiny little detail nuance, please don't be like, well, no, you know.
No, you know, respectfully, there's a starting point, and I think the fact that there is a starting point that hopefully, you know, terms can just be ensured through our lawyer that, you know, if there is something that is questionable, there can be some negotiation, but we fully recognize the olive branch and, you know, the goal in all of this is to get the boys, you know, back on the track. This is family property to use it as such. So the appreciation is certainly there. And we want to thank you and, you know, work with the board moving forward for the sole purpose at this point in time of getting the boys riding. So much appreciated. Thank you.
I'm curious why, I have friends like over 21. Why would they not be able to ride with me?
I think there was a general feeling that if it was over 21, that might be some form of business that is happening, and there was just sort of concern that this should be limited to friends. That was the feeling for why it should be that way, and that's why it was crafted that way, to think about it as your sort of peers as opposed to some sort of formal commercial training.
Well, I'd like to add to that. I need to ride with at least like my trainer. That'd be like the whole purpose. It's like a training track. That's why we built it. Like, he's not 21 or under, and like that's like a little like absurd, like the limit of 21, I would say, and then like. I agree.
I think if your attorney, you know, will speak to us, I mean, there
Well,
might
knows
be.
that.
Yeah, and then there might be a distinction between someone's physical presence versus you know,
Competitions or
actually-
fighting, you know.
correct. So I think that, you know, that's a point, you know, we're happy to hear your position when you're ready to provide that.
Yeah, thank you.
And make sure, please bring that back also to the attorney as
Yeah.
well, that if there's
We appreciate
tweaks,
the offer
things.
to,
Yeah.
you know, certainly investigate, you know, just a few areas that maybe we need to, you know, just have some further discussion on. So
Yeah.
that is much appreciated.
Just also just know if there's tweaks, this has to go before here again and voted on again. Because we may vote on this and this is a formal offer. If there's changes, we have to do that again.
Yeah.
And my understanding is it has to be registered with the judge as well. Is that correct, Bob?
The stipulation would be filed with the court and approved by the judge as a court order. I mean, the judge could always say, I'm not doing this. I don't think that would happen if the parties have agreed based upon this very contentious matter. I think the judge would agree. But again, we don't have the judge who entered the order on the bench anymore. This will be a new judge.
Right, okay.
Okay. Any others? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item C, under new business, the consideration to join the Environmental Advisory Council's letter regarding the Manwalamick wastewater treatment plant.
Are you guys taking any questions on that last one?
Or not, we can do it in public comment, which we
Okay.
should do in. So Alex is gonna describe that to us. This has a long kind of procedural history, but the Environmental Advisory Council has weighed in previously on the East Stroudsburg wastewater treatment plant, and it's essentially the same type of weighing in, and I thought it might be prudent for us to join in their efforts. So Alex, you describe that for us.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I could describe it, and you also have members of the EAC here present. DEP publishes notices in the PA bulletin. They have public comment periods. In this case, it ended, but then it was extended. Basically, the deadline for public comment is, I believe it's February 10th or something like that now. And the EAC wanted to see if they could get permission from the supervisors to send a letter during that public comment period to ask for a public hearing, which is sort of the same procedural thing that happened with East Stroudsburg wastewater plant. In addition to that, there were some concerns that they raised at the meeting. In particular, it's also worth noting that this wastewater treatment plant discharge is very close to River's Edge and Minisink Park. By very close, I mean within hundreds of feet, so it's, you know, kind of like right there. There's some concerns with some of the outdated technology. And the EAC wanted to emphasize upgrades to best available technology. And then it was also noted that during the River's Edge Master Site Development Plan, when I looked into it and I brought to the EAC's attention, after they discussed it, there were endangered aquatic species that were identified in that vicinity. So that was included in the draft. So there was a draft letter put together, and it's basically just a draft, just to, because the EAC wants to see if they had your blessing to send this or a version of it to the DEP, and that was kind of how they left it. I don't know if the council members want to comment at all, or.
The reason I asked Russ to stick around for this was that a couple of years ago, we had Hanover Engineering do a survey of that plant, and there were some repairs necessary, deficiencies. I just wonder, Russ, if you remember any of the highlights of that, it might be relevant to what we're talking about now.
No, I don't have any of that information handy. I just don't recall.
Okay,
Robert.
1 second.
So can I just so I can understand, the main point of this letter is requesting that the DEP make a public meeting of this, because they don't normally do a public meeting, is that correct?
That's
For
correct.
these sorts of applications, and the main reason for the public meeting is a recommendation from the EAC. I mean, I see 4 points, but it's basically 1 point, that you think PA American should move to UV disinfecting from chlorine. Is that correct? Is there anything else that I'm missing here?
Wait, one more thing,
Yeah.
I have another thing, but sorry.
That's
One
one of
second, once we get the
the
comment.
technological upgrades that were identified as sort of best available technology that we know other plants. I believe the Smithfield Sewer Authority has UV at their
Yeah, that's what this says. And is
Yeah.
is chlorine no longer allowed as a sort? I'm
Oh, it's
trying to
allowed.
understand
Yeah.
part of me is trying to understand the jurisdiction that the township has here, because my understanding is this is entirely governed by DEP.
That's why we need you to sign the, go to the DP with us.
Right, and so this idea sort of makes us a party, but it'd be great to be at a party, to be a party member, but do we have any jurisdiction? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that's a question to you, Ron. I mean, what sort of jurisdiction do we have to govern, this?
Well,
Even if I agree with it 100%, yes, it should be
I just want
recommended.
to say, it's kind of the same, in Rock, we talk about it legally, but it's like Strasburg Borough weighs in, you know, with PennDOT and DEP on the permitting for the theoretical I-80 expansion and whatnot.
And get nowhere on it.
I'm not gonna tell you that I'm not gonna tell you I disagree with that. I do think that DEP has been kind of responsive in this area, and Alex could probably talk about it more than I, in terms of like, and this is not an NPDES permit. This is,
No, it's.
It's an NPDS permit for wastewater.
okay.
Yeah, it's
Alright,
wastewater.
It's a permit renewal. They only come once every 5 years, Mr. Chairman. That's the other thing.
Right,
you know.
yeah, I know, we.
If you missed this, then you have to-
This, we got 5 years or whatever they dumping.
Here's another question. Have you also looked into the wastewater treatment plant of the paper mill and what they use? And
Well, they're not up for renewal. We can do that next, definitely. But what I'm saying, this particular facility is bought by $1 million or $1 billion company. It is public record that they are polluting. We're well above healthcare standards in the water, although it's not illegal. Act 537 says that there should be some upgrades going on. They do claim that they're doing upgrades, but you cannot find an upgrade list or a timeline list any.
Or
So
anyone,
for all I know, they're doing upgrades on their office.
or anyone to speak to as far as I know.
So, yeah, you can't speak to, so. The only person, and I did ask this a couple of meetings ago directly to Michael, who said you have to go to the DEP. Of which we did in turn do. We went to the DEP. So all we're asking you is to maybe check inside some of these situations. This is a $1 billion company. They have money to upgrade the facility. This is also our area that they are dumping into.
Right, let me just clarify that the procedural posture here, I added it to the agenda. Basically to join in requesting the hearing, just so we can get that information, it doesn't.
Yeah,
take a
that's what
position.
we want.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, it doesn't obligate us to a position,
No,
yeah, no, I know, I'm just.
And I wanna, part of the reason I asked too is to highlight that. You can have the public hearing, doesn't mean anything's gonna change, and doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna have any power to make any change, I wanna make sure that's clear. You can do this, that doesn't mean. It's
courage
DEP
is
that is that,
contagious, Michael.
We all feel like we have enough information to vote on the letter.
oh, I mean, my question was to Ron, but.
All you're doing is basically saying, we want a public hearing so we can make our comments.
Okay, perfect.
Whether or not they'll listen to those comments or whether
Well,
they'll
and Alex
not,
would be the
I
one.
don't know, but you're basically saying is, as the chair said, when you have a PennDOT permit, PennDOT usually sends a letter when they're doing their review and say, do you want to make any comments? Do you have any comments about this? Any comments about
And
that?
Alex would be the one.
Even though
making our-
PennDOT makes the call, the comment, the township can still weigh in. So that's what you're doing. You're
Yeah,
saying,
and
we
I,
want to weigh in.
right, I just see it as a mechanism, because I think the DAC did this on their own before, I think it looks better if it comes from us to appreciating, their concerns, and then if we do have any comment, ultimately, Alex, you'd be the
Well,
one.
and I just want, the other thing is, from a technology standpoint, and. I don't know if UV is better than chlorine. I mean, the last thing I want is just feces going into the broadhead that's been. Lamps put on it. So before I ever submitted something saying I'm advocating for UV light on sewage as opposed to chlorine, which from my history, it seems like that is a better way to kill the sewage. I would like to sort of make sure that is true before I sign my name's something recommending it go a certain way. That's the other thing.
Alright, so accordingly, we could make,
But we're not doing that right now. We're just saying we want a public hearing, so.
yeah, so I'll differentiate when I ask for a motion in a second that, DAC can submit this should they want to. But ours would be distinct then, I mean, or edit the letter. And.
Why don't we
let
do
it-
this? Why
you
don't we
want
have a
to-
letter, that comes from the township that's very simple that says, based on based on the attached recommendations from the. Smithfield Environmental Advisory Council, we would request that you host and then just repeat the first.
Sure, would you
That
make
work?
that,
And then they're both attached.
perfect, do you make that motion, Michael?
I just did.
Motion by Mr. Albert, do I have a second, Mr. Levenheim, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we will now proceed to general public comment. If you'd like, please come up to the podium and state your name, and where you live, and then we'll. start the time. Any public
Are you
comment?
gonna ask us on Zoom?
Yeah,
Can I go ahead and jump in?
sure. Go ahead.
So I have a question about back nine. So you have an injunction and you're shutting these people's track down because of sound, correct?
No, the appeal that is in place is around the operation of a business motocross facility, which by our township zoning officer is not an allowed use in the R1 zone.
But how does that affect people riding on their personal land? If they're not doing a business, it seems pretty easy. You could just go ahead and let them ride and say you can't have a business. Am I wrong there?
You wanna pause the timer, Jack? Just to answer that, we in fact, made an offer to do just that for the folks affected, that, reside there.
Because that was the offer that just went out. It should be said that.
No, it wasn't. You said people under 21, which is lunacy to me. Why would that matter, somebody's age? Wouldn't it be more like limit the number of motorcycles?
We appreciate the feedback, but we're gonna let our offer stand.
Hold on. You can't give me a reason on that age thing? Because it doesn't make any logical sense. If you could just tell me, it'd be pretty simple, right? Do you not have an answer?
I mean, we do have an answer. I'm happy to talk about it with the lawyer.
Why can't you do it publicly?
Hold on, it's not question and answer.
Yes,
You can continue to make a comment.
The purpose of this was to give the Burn Boys and their friends the opportunity to ride on track. And not for this to be a motocross facility. That's the answer.
Yeah, which is wild because I ride and I'm well older than 21. Now I can't go ride at the Burns house just simply because of this law that you guys are putting in or this injunction. That's lunacy.
The judge actually gave us this opportunity to present it. He doesn't care.
No, I do care. I'm just curious as to, I think it's it just doesn't make sense to me logically as why you would choose a specific age. I see what you're saying, but what you're saying doesn't make sense.
Well, I think there's a trust issue as well. Being perfectly honest.
So you don't trust adults, but you trust kids?
No, I don't trust that if we leave it open to anyone, that it won't become a motocross facility.
How about you deal with that later and you just go ahead and actually let them use their land the way they're supposed to. And then if they violate that, then you shut it down if you catch them running as a business.
We're not doing crosstalk.
It's got 30%.
Yeah, we had crosstalk.
That's my answer. That's
Okay.
why the three of us came to that conclusion that Goodwill offer.
Goodwill offer to use their land to their choice. My goodness. I thought this was the United States.
Which the judge specifically said was it was up to us, and unless we allowed that it would not be allowed to use any motorcycle on the property, correct?
Okay.
All right, gentlemen's time's expired. I'm gonna go to, say Mr. Reinhardt or Reinhardt?
Dr. Reinhardt. Yeah, Dr. Philip Reinhardt. So I think this is a good start. I think it's good that you guys are trying to get these kids back to riding. I think it's pretty aware that this area has a drug problem and keeping kids off of drugs. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, we have methadone clinics here. We have overdoses left and right. Half of my graduating class is addicted to something or in recovery. These kind of sports will keep these kids off of those kind of problems in society. So I think allowing them is a good first start. But I do share the kind of concern that this is somebody's private property. Dictating who is welcome on that property to do what is kind of an overreach, in my opinion. I wouldn't come to your property and say, hey, you can't have somebody over 21 mowing your lawn next to my property line, right? And even if they did want to start a business, I think there's a major problem where they're going to be restricting property rights for people who want to develop businesses because a neighbor doesn't like it, right? I live right near Shawnee Mountain. I have to hear a whirring noise, all winter long from snow blowers. I would never come in and say, hey, as an annoyed neighbor, I have the authority to come and tell you guys you can't run a business there. Because I recognize the benefits of the community. And I think the same thing happens here. So like I said, I'm happy that you guys are moving forward with something to at least get these kids to have some sort of positive outlet that they could do with their life. I think you're still extending your authority far beyond what it should be, regardless of what a court may say. America is built on life, liberty, and property. Right? That's the decisions of the things that the government, you're supposed to protect people's access to do the things what they want with those three things. And I think there's a lot of local tyranny happening here, keeping a family from using their property.
Thank you.
I'm online if I could speak.
Sure, go ahead, Terry.
Hi, my name is Terry Van Bresen Martin. I live in Chestnut Hill Township. I'm going to be 70 years old this year. I wanted you to know that I, in my day, would go to snowmobile grass races at East Stroudsburg Airport. So I'm really familiar with the area. I was president of our homeowner association from 1999 to 2003. I'm a mother of 10. I am a woman that was an involved president. We had a lot of kids playing basketball at our recreation center, and they were like my kids, and I loved them. And I had an older son that had, I was here, okay, but some of the kids' parents had to commute. So I'm going to tell you that within a 1 to 2 mile radius, 15 of those kids are dead. By the time my son was 44, he never used drugs or alcohol. He had 3 heart attacks because he had to carry the coffins of his friends. And in August, I had a client that was 26 that committed suicide. And in September, I was asked to check on my neighbor's son, Johnny, the one that used to ride his ATVs up and down the road and get yelled at. And when me and the state police officer walked in to do a well-being check, I turned the corner and he was dead on the floor. This is Johnny. Okay, he's a 26-year-old man with 2 kids, but he was dead. Same kid that used to get yelled at when he was riding his ATV. And I'm just saying there's got to be a middle ground, and we have to remember this is private property, but it grieves my soul personally to see this. These kids aren't going to stay little long. My kids grew up. My kids grew up. And they grew up real quick. And these kids aren't going to be little long. And boy, I'll tell you, I know the judge ruled one way, but we're really pushing the line with overreach with the government. I want you to know I so much appreciate your offer to these people, but you know, it changed me forever. I drive past those basketball courts, they're not there. They're dead. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Terry. We appreciate your comment.
I wonder, am I able to talk?
Yes, Tammy, go ahead.
Actually, I just have a question, 2 questions for the supervisors. I wonder what your process is when somebody applies for a job. What do you require? I mean, as far as is experience in that. The other question is, how do you feel if someone did apply for a job and had to bring their application back because they were harassed on social media, which we kind of know that that has happened? I want to know your feelings on that because it does reflect the township, and a lot of the residents are concerned about that. So I wondered if you had any comment.
You want to pause your camera? I just, hold on, Katie, you can have your own comment, but I'm not gonna do individual response to her. But Tammy, I share your perspective, and I think you know that we spoke earlier today, and you know, I will let my 2 colleagues speak for themselves. But at least for the appointments of various commissions and whatnot, everyone had to submit a resume or cover letter, etc. And then they were interviewed by Alex extensively, I think, in most cases, and then recommendations ultimately made to the board, at least with the information, all the information a couple of weeks ago. So that's all I can say, but I'll defer to supervisors out there in Levenheim if they have other comments that they wanted to say. And let me just please say that I don't want this to become. I agree, Ron.
Well,
I'm saying, I don't want this to be, call and response, but if you so choose so chose to respond, you can. But I'm gonna, 1 minute,
I don't have any comments on that.
okay, nothing.
I'll respond and then, I think, I know the person in question you're talking about, and I have never seen any applications, resumes submitted. And then I heard that, this individual had withdrawn. That's all I know. And it's like, if you don't want the position, fine, but, I can't comment on why or what the process was, only that the application was withdrawn and was no longer under consideration.
Well, I mean, I wasn't gonna make a comment, but the supervisors are aware that this person withdrew because they were harassed and bullied online.
Yeah.
That said.
Yeah.
The application was withdrawn, so that person's not in contention, whether they would have been chosen or not is irrelevant. Because
And by the way, that statement that he was,
well, whether that now that's true or not, I don't know.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean.
We have no way of knowing, but that was what the
I saw how
applicant said.
people, react online, so I understand that, so. Tammy, anything else? You have 2 minutes that, Katie, I'll get you in a moment, but.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know the response of that because it concerns me. It concerns me that this township, I feel, is being bullied lately. And that's not how you make decisions. And a lot of the residents feel that way. So I just want to make you aware of that. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it, thank you, Tammy. Okay. So you wanna,
I'd like to also state that, and it is available on all of the YouTube, township meetings, that I have also been harassed and bullied by certain members of the township that I will not name. And I did not withdraw my application. At first, certain people were very for me, and then they found out where I live. And then I was harassed and bullied online. It is available. You can all see it on any of the YouTube videos. And I did not withdraw my application. So if somebody else decided they couldn't handle the heat and they got out of the kitchen, I feel like my apologies, but I stood here and I withheld it.
okay. Any others? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right,
All motion to adjourn.
motion by Mr. Bear, second by Mr. Loveenheim, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Adjourned at 7:43. Thank you, everyone.
Here's some